Power Macintoshes were introduced. These were known as the NuBus PowerMacs, and they had 3 design variants. The PowerMac 6100 was released in the form of a pizza box, the 7100 came in the form of a regular 2VX case, and the 8100 had a mini tower design. All 3 computers were the first Macs to have PowerPC 601 chips, which was the beginning of the switch from Motorola 68K processors. The PowerMac LCs were designed as low-cost devices mainly for the education market. The 5200 and 5300 series came in an all-in-one case, while the 6200 series had a Quadra-style case requiring an external monitor. The LCs with an all-in-one case could also be used as TVs, as they had video, I/O and TV slots. The PowerMac 9500 was the first Apple Mac to comply with the PCI industry standard, and it had a full tower case with 7 internal drive bays. The ability to use PCI cards made it really useful for hardware expansion. It was also the first Macintosh to have the open firmware implementation inside the ROM, which enables the installation of other operating systems such as Apple's Rhapsody OS, and with hardware upgrades, macOS 10. The 9500 also supported up to 1.5 GB of RAM. Some other PCI PowerMacs that were introduced included the 7500, the mid-range 8500 with S-Video support, the PowerMac 5400, which retained the 5200 all-in-one case, and the 6400 line, which had what's known as an Insta-Tower case. At the time, Apple was falling behind in market share, and with the return of Steve Jobs in 1997, the PowerMac G3 line was created. The G3s had a PowerPC 750 processor, an optional DVD drive, a dual SCSI configuration, and came in 3 different variants: a desktop, a mini tower, and an all-in-one design. The all-in-ones were released months after the other 2 G3s, and it was only sold to the education market. It was also notoriously the heaviest Mac in the world as well, designated as the Molar Mac. The beige G3s came equipped with a minimum of 233 MHz processing speed, and they were also the first PowerMacs to officially support macOS 10, with a memory upgrade. The blue and white PowerMac G3s came with a translucent blue case design, which signified the end of beige desktop Macs, and Apple's continuation of colourful Macs after the iMac G3. It was also the first New World ROM PowerMac, which meant instead of having a serial port, it had 2 USB ports and FireWire support. One iconic ability with these PowerMacs is with a simple pull of the handle, you get all the interior hardware, which allowed for easy upgrades for RAM, CPU, and the internal hard disk. Talk about an easy open case design. The PowerMac also came with a processing speed of either 300, 350, 400 or 450 MHz. However, the processor itself can be upgraded to a G4 with third-party chips. The PowerMac G4 was introduced with a new graphite case design with see-through handles. There were initially 2 different models, the PCI graphics version and the AGP graphics version. While the PCI PowerMac G4 had the exact same motherboard as the G3 minus the processor, the G4 AGP was considered a major revision of the PowerMac line with the introduction of the unified logic board architecture, an improved open firmware prompt, and Wi-Fi compatibility with an AirPort card. The PowerMac G4 continued to be upgraded by Apple with the graphite case until July 2001, where it was replaced with the Quicksilver case. The G4 Quicksilver was also one of the first PowerMacs to come with macOS 10. The final PowerMac G4 was known as the Mirror Drive Doors Edition, released in 2002. These PowerMacs took several logic board enhancements from Apple's Xserve line, along with dual processors and enhanced graphics. It was also notoriously known as one of the loudest PowerMacs ever, gaining the unofficial nickname of the G4 Wind Tunnel. With the end of the G4 line, it also signified the end of official macOS 9 native support. During the PowerMac G4's release lifespan, Apple introduced a cubic version of the G4 in a small case design. Although it was visually stunning, it was seen as very expensive and didn't perform as well as Apple wanted in terms of sales. This was also Apple's major first product flop after Steve Jobs took back the company. The Cube, however, was easily optimizable. Simply pushing the handle at the bottom allows the user to pull out the computer components out of the case for hardware modifications. Enter the PowerMac G5. This was the first Apple computer to support 64-bit computing, and it also introduced an aluminum cheese grater design. The Power Mac G5 also signified a huge leap in processing power with the new PowerPC G5 processor, the use of PCI X slots, a SATA bus, and depending on the variant purchased, the maximum of either 4 or 8 gigs of RAM. The final performance upgraded G5, which was introduced in late 2005, could support up to 16 GB of RAM. For the Intel Switch, developers were given an Intel transition kit in the form of a Mac Pro to test their programs. This was formerly known as an Apple development platform. It had a Pentium 4 processor and a regular PC BIOS from Phoenix Technologies. It ran an x86 version of macOS 10.4 Tiger, and funny enough, when that installation disk leaked online, it kicked off the Hackintosh movement, with people managing to get OS X Tigers running on their PC. And the rest is history. The cheese-grater design of the Power Mac G5 was carried on into the Mac Pro, which signified the end of the PowerPC line and the beginning of Intel-based desktops. It was based on two 64-bit dual-core Intel Xeon 5300 processors, which also included a 128-bit vector engine. Apple sold the first Mac Pro with only a single configuration, as they knew customers would prefer to make their own upgrades to the device, such as its use of 4 hard drive bays. The outer case design difference compared to the G5 is that the Mac Pro now has a second optical drive bay. The Mac Pro had several major revamps. In particular, the 2010 model could support up to 128GB of RAM with an octa-core or 12-core configuration. The Mac Pro design was once again revamped in the form of a trash can in 2013. However, professionals considered it a long-term failure because it was unable to adapt to changing hardware trends, especially reduced expansion capabilities, and there were no hardware updates for this device for the next 6 years. The Mac Pro notoriously didn't have any PCI slots either. However, it did have plenty of I/O ports, including 6 Thunderbolt ports and support for HDMI. Last but not least, the 2019 Mac Pro returns with an upgraded cheese grater design. It is Apple's most powerful and most expensive computer to date. In fact, the maximum price is around 82,000 Australian dollars. The RAM is expandable to 1.5 terabytes, the first Mac to ever do so, and features 8 PCIe slots for expansion. This is the first Mac since the Power Mac 9600 to have such expanded PCI capabilities. The design also includes a new thermal architecture with 3 impeller fans which ensure that the Mac runs at its peak performance at all times. Such a computer is great for extensive 3D rendering, Adobe After Effects, and other heavy-duty applications. Manual hardware expansion has also become very easy once again. By pulling the handle at the top of the Mac Pro, users can see the interior of the Mac and make their own modifications to the computer, such as upgrading the SSD or adding multiple PCI cards.